Welcome to Sew with Monty. Today we're going to start a little project, and I want to show you how to take a basic pattern and customize it for fit and style so that you can really enjoy and appreciate what you're making. This pattern we're using today is just a basic unisex bomber jacket. Very generic, comes in small, medium, and large, extra large through triple extra large. Now on the back of the flat, you have a little size chart here, and it's got on here, it's a little hard to see, very small writing, but it has your body size measurements compared to what the suggested pattern should be. So for instance, if I am a 40-inch chest or bust, I'm going to end up being in a medium, which this is what I've selected for myself, is a basic medium pattern. Now, I want to show you how to customize this because you may not be a complete medium. You might be a medium in the chest, but maybe you're fuller in the hips, or maybe the jacket's too long, or maybe you need a smaller shoulder measurement. So this is what I want to show you right now, is how to adjust this pattern very easily and then end up with something that you really like the fit of. So I've taken myself, because I'm making this for myself, and I've laid out my pattern on top of the original pattern to show you what I've done to make it fit me. First of all, through the width of the body in here, below the armhole, I've left it at a medium. That would be this line right here. So I've lined my pattern up and I've left it on medium here. At the top, I wanted the small. I want the small neckline, I want the small shoulder, and I want the small armhole. So I've laid this along the line of the small. So once I've got to here, and then I've traced off to here, I had the sleeve part, the armhole part, that wouldn't fit together because this one's coming here, this is over here, and I had to align them. So what I've done is I've connected it at the shoulder, came down about 1.5 inches in my armhole on the small, and then I pivoted this small armhole, see that's where it was, I pivoted it out to where it lines up with the medium alignment in the body. This way I still have the small armhole, but I moved it out so it lines up with the medium width of the body down here. The small sleeve will still fit, which I prefer. My small collar or hood or whatever I use up here will still fit, and my shoulders are small. So a very simple change. All I did was trace off the top here, stopped about 1.5 inches into the armhole, took my small armhole, see it's an exact copy of that armhole, and then I just held here, pivoted it out till it lined up with my medium, and then I had to raise it just a little bit here so I could keep the armhole that I originally had. So sleeve still fits, collar still fits, but I've got a wider body, which I needed. Now I'm going to slide this out of the way and pull the front over so you can see it as well. So we've done the same thing on the front, as you can see. I've taken the small neckline, shoulder, and the armhole, see? And I've put it right there, and then same thing, about 1.5 inches in here. This would have been the original armhole for the small, but I pivoted it out till it lines up with the medium. Added that little bit in there because that was the original armhole. I want to keep the original small armhole, but now I have the width of the body here. Now let's go on and talk about placement of pockets. This is more of a style call than a fits call, but what I've done is I've used the original pocket. I want to do the kangaroo pocket. And what I like about this pattern is there's abundance of variety here that you can mix. You can put the rib collar on the neckline, you can do a hood, or you can do a regular collar. You have zipper welt pockets, you have the kangaroo pocket, or you have the side pocket. So you have a lot of different multiples here that you can use to make this bomber jacket with. So I've chosen to mix it a little bit. I'm going to use the rib collar, and I'm going to use the kangaroo pocket on the front. So what I've done is I've taken the kangaroo pocket and I've folded it on the small cut line. The difference is, on this pattern, it only called for a turn down here on this edge and no lining, nothing else, just a turn under. And I don't like that as much. I wanted a little bit more finish on this, so I've turned it all the way under, and I've allowed a 5/8 inch seam allowance so I can completely line my pocket. And when we get to talking about the fabric and cutting it, I'll show you more about that in a minute. I've also made marks here, and I've added, this is my own doing, a patch pocket on the lining, so that I have an inside pocket on my jacket, so that I want to put valuables or my cell phone in there. I can do it and it won't be on the outside in a kangaroo pocket where it might fall out. So these are little aesthetic changes I've made on the front, as well as the fit changes up here. So let's go over one more piece. I want to show you the sleeve, because we've made some changes there as well. Let me pull it over here for you. Now the sleeve, I have changed it quite a bit. First of all, I've cut it. I originally cut it on the small line, which is the small dash line here. And then I went to the only thing that's still original on this is actually the armpit on the small. What I've done is tapered the sleeve because it's very full down here. I've also shortened it to be my sleeve length, so it's appropriate for me. And the way I did it was just to line it up at my shoulder, find out how long I wanted it to be, and then considered a 2-inch rib cuff on here as well, because we have the rib. And then I tapered it, so I didn't have so much fullness. I didn't want it to be very voluminous here, I just wanted it comfortable. So I've taken it in 2 inches on each side, which is a 4-inch total in the taper here. I've also done one other thing to it. This has a lot of ease in this sleeve compared, and I measured it against the armhole to see how much extra ease it had. And it had quite a bit that I really didn't want. I wanted my sleeve to be softer and look more like a drop shoulder in a jean jacket. So I took the cap down a 1/2 inch and I blended it off on each side back into my original pattern. So I've just reduced this entire cap a 1/2 inch and then just tapered back to 0 at the underarm points. That way I don't have too much cap on my sleeve and it's not puffy, and it doesn't look, it doesn't restrict my movement. The more cap height you have in certain aspects will actually restrict your movement. You won't be able to open your arms up as well because it's so long, it'll start to bind you at your bicep level. So this is just a little secret. Shortening the cap sometimes is a good idea. So that's all the pieces that we've altered here. Everything else I'm pretty much cutting right off the pattern as it is. So let's go on and let me show you the cutting part of this and how we did the fabric. So now we've cut out our pattern onto our fabric. Now I wanted to talk to you about placement and things you need to look out for when you're cutting out your garment. First of all, if something's placed on the fold, make sure that you note that and put your fabric on the fold. I know that sounds very obvious, but it's very easy to get distracted and cut these separate, and then you don't have enough seam allowance to put them back together, and this pattern would be, or this panel would be essentially a waste at that point. The other thing, I chose this fabric, Little Happy Campers, because it had a pattern and it has a subtle stripe design. And something you want to pay attention to when you have something like this is that you align your fabric up so that you can see that all my campers and my Cadillacs are in the same row. I don't have them like this where it's off, which would be very distracting on my garment. So you want to take the extra time. If you have a pattern that has a horizontal sequence to it, try to line it up so that everything flows through in your design. The other thing you want to be very careful of, and this is pretty obvious, but some patterns are subtle and it's easy to do. You don't want to flip one of your pattern pieces upside down accidentally. Now this is obvious that would be a nightmare, but let's say it's a subtle flower or leaf and there's just one little petal or one little flower that looks upright, and one panel you've got it flipped the other way and you don't notice it till maybe you have the garment finished even. So be careful with your fabric and your print to make sure that you align it horizontally and keep it one way if necessary. Usually if it's a print of any type, I try to always just go one way, put the top at the top and keep it that way, and I don't flip any of my pattern pieces upside down. That way if there is a subtle difference, I'm not going to find out after I've got it all made up. So we're going to cut out the back and the two fronts, and then we have the sleeve. Let me pull it over here. We're going to talk about all the outer garment, and then we'll talk about the lining. The outer fabric is referred to as self. That's just an industry standard that we call it self. And this is their sleeve. As you can see, I've done the same thing. I've lined it up at the armpit so that if my arms are down, my little RVs and my little campers and my little Cadillacs are all in a line there. So you want to line it up on the sleeve as well. Don't leave it out and ignore it when you're cutting this out. So these are all the main body pieces, the self that I've cut out. So I've got my 2 sleeves, my back, and my 2 fronts. Now I'm going to go on and show you the second part of this. We're going to talk about the lining. So the lining I've chosen is a gingham that's kind of a flamingo color, and it matches the little Cadillacs and some of the RVs. So kind of matching it up here. So I have the same thing. Now this pattern isn't as important to match lines on because it's such a tiny little gingham that I don't really care if the little checks line up perfectly because it's so small, very subtle. But I have the front, the back, and the sleeves on this as well. And here's the sleeves. Let me open one of them. One of them has the ease at the top, and that's a sleeve. I have turned everything in one direction though. I don't have anything laying sideways because if you notice, my gingham does have a pattern. If I turned it sideways, you would definitely see a difference there. So no horizontal crossing on the, I always keep it parallel to the grain line. That too matters because your fabric may behave differently if you start cutting it with the grain line crosswise or the arrows crosswise. So you want to be careful there. Lining's cut out and my self is cut out. Now let's talk about the pockets. I've added on the front lining a patch pocket. And I've made the dimensions finish 4.5 wide by 6 inches long. And the reason I chose a patch pocket, I'm going to show you here on the panel, is because I wanted something inside that I could, as I said before, keep my valuables in. The reason I chose a patch instead of a welt was because a welt added another layer of fabric here, and I didn't want it to be quite that bulky. This is a very lightweight self and lining, so I wanted to keep it lightweight. So I've done a patch pocket, and I've marked it with my chalk where it belongs. See the 2 corners right here? And this pocket will get sewn up. I've already turned it down. I put a little interfacing in the top to keep it with some body, and then I'll edge stitch this down, and then I'll clean finish this and then turn it all under so that it will sew within the confines of my 2 marks up here. So I'm going to put one on each side. I've already got this one set. This is the left side pocket, and I'm going to put one on the right. So inside my lining, I'm going to have 2 pockets in here. This is great again for anything that you don't want to slip out of your kangaroo pocket, something that's more valuable. Credit card, cell phone, etc. So this will be the next part. I will go over and I'll sew this pocket on both sides of my lining. Now, when you finish cutting everything out, the first part of what you're going to be doing is putting the details such as pockets on before you start assembling the garment. So all the detail work will go on first, then we'll come back and do the assembly of the garment. So let's talk about the lower pocket. This is the kangaroo pocket. And what I've cut here is self and a lining. Now I've got one on both sides, so let's go back to our front panel here and I'll show it to you. I've already sewn one on so you could see, and this is the other one. We'll talk about the other side as we do this. So these 2 pockets here, it's hard to see because I've lined the pocket up with my print just as well. See how everything's in a row? So all my campers are lined up together. And what I've done here is I've sewn my pocket up and I've put a double stitch on here, and I've used top stitch thread on the top. Now the secret to using the top stitch thread on the top is I've used regular thread on the bottom. This way it doesn't get gunked up in my bobbin. The bobbin is sensitive, it doesn't take the top stitch thread so well. But I've got a matching regular thread on the bobbin so that my top stitch thread can be successfully used on the top. Okay, so how we assemble this little pocket is, again, I've put interfacing on here. Now these are things that the pattern did not call for. These are design adjustments just like we did the fit adjustments. The pattern doesn't have this piece, but I wanted it to have some stability here and not be turning down like this every time I wore it. So I put interfacing on the pocket opening. This is 2 inches wide, and I dock the corner here. I don't need it to go all the way down to the edge. So I crop the corner and I iron this on the opening side of my pocket. Now this facing, this is the inner, or the facing of my pocket, lining rather, I'm sorry. The lining of my pocket gets sewn like this. I would put it here and I sew 5/8 inch here, 5/8 inch here, and 5/8 inch here. Clip the corners, I graded the seam and turned it, and then I understitched it. See the little white stitch right here? I understitched all the way around the opening and the two sides. The reason being, I didn't want my lining to accidentally show above my top stitch when I place my pocket on the front of my garment. So understitching here is a good idea. Once I had this understitched, I sewed it on to the front of my jacket like this, and I've used a 1/16 inch stitch up here. First I did my top stitch. I did a 1/16, and then I put the needle onto the left and did a 1/2 inch. So I've got a pretty wide stitch here. Now this could be anything here. You could do a decorative stitch. I could have come over here and did a stitch. Actually, I didn't need any stitch at all because it's understitched here. I could have left it alone. But anyway, this is my opening, and then I come along here and I stitch close to the edge. When I got down to where the opening was, I switched to a zigzag, and I did 1.5 inches or 1.6 wide and 1 inch, or 1.6 long with 1.5 inches or 1.5 width, and I just zigzagged down through here to tack it at the end of my pockets instead of just going straight through and backing up. This little zigzag is going to hold it a lot stronger than the single needle. Just an option. These are all options that could be done. You could do a double needle here if you want. So there's many different ways of doing it. This is all about design and style. So the next point would be, one thing I want to mention before we go on that I forgot, your zipper length. Everything about this jacket is governed by the zipper length. And that's the reason they only come in certain sizes. So you have to work within the sizes that are available. Most of the time in a store situation, if you're going to a fabric store, consumer fabric store, you're going to get even numbered zippers, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, so forth. This zipper is a 20-inch zipper. And I know that my finished measurement of my waistband is going to be 2 inches. That allows me 18 finished inches in my jacket to put in my zipper. What I've done is I've cut this jacket 18.25 inch from the finish line to the finish line so that I have a little wiggle room. I'd rather have this a little long and trim it than have it too short and my zipper won't fit. So when you're thinking of how you're going to make your jacket and how long you're going to make your jacket, your zipper has to govern that. So you choose the length of your zipper first and then make all your pattern pieces fit within that length. Like I said, I made mine about 1/4 inch longer. It's easy to trim it off or take a deeper seam. But if this is too short and my zipper's too long, it's going to be very difficult to work with. So anyway, that's important. The zipper is very important when you're doing this. So the next step is, we've got our details taken care of. I'm going to finish doing the pockets, and then we're going to start doing the assembly. We're going to assemble the body of the self, and we're going to assemble the body of the lining. And I'm going to show you from that point how to put the rest of the jacket together.